So today, we're going to dive into a pretty radical way of seeing the world. It's all centered around a practice called silent photography. And really, it's less about taking pictures and a whole lot more about mastering the art of, well, of disappearance. And this is where the source material really kicks things off, with this kind of haunting image and a really powerful statement about where we're at today. The argument is that we're basically trapped in a culture of constant noise, and it's completely severed our connection to the world around us. So, what is this predicament, really? And more importantly, is there a way out? Okay, so first things first, we've got to diagnose the problem. The source calls it a shared delusion, this fundamental misunderstanding of reality that, shapes everything we do, especially when we pick up a camera. And here it is, the core idea, the primary hallucination of separation. It's this belief, one that's just baked into our culture, that we're these separate sovereign observers. We're standing on the outside looking in, as if the world is on the other side of a pane of glass. We become the all-important subject, and the world just becomes an object for us to record. And the source argues this is it's a disastrous illusion. And wow, this quote just nails the consequence, doesn't it? We start acting like tourists everywhere, even in our own lives. And our cameras, they stop being tools for connection and become these weapons of assertion. We frame things, we extract them, we try to possess them. We're turning the living, breathing world into content to be mined, all to prove I was here, instead of just, being here. So if the problem is us constantly asserting our presence, making all this noise, then the solution has got to be the exact opposite, right? This next part introduces the antidote, a totally radical shift in how we see things, called the conduct of disappearance. And this right here is the crucial point. The whole idea is to forget about capturing the moment. The real work, the deeper practice, is the conduct of disappearance. It's all about learning how to recede, how to become quiet enough that the world finally reveals itself on its own terms, not on ours. Now, this whole process starts with something the source calls perceptual shedding. It's kind of like leaving your ego at the door, right? It's a conscious ritual act of setting aside the you that always wants to control and possess the scene. And this whole process is called the walk-in. But listen, this is not just a hike in the woods. First, you start walking with a very specific intention, to leave yourself behind. And as you keep going, the labels our minds slap on everything, that's a tree, this is a rock, they start to thin out. They lose their grip. And then finally, the world stops being this collection of separate things and just becomes a unified flow of experience, of weather and light and the slope of the land. So where does a transformation like this actually happen? Well, the source guides us toward these very specific kinds of environments, places where that veil between the observer and the observed is already pretty weak. They're called thin places. A thin place isn't just some spot on a map. It's more like a breakpoint in reality. It's a marginal landscape. Think a bog or a shifting coastline or misty uplands, where that solid boundary between you and the world starts to waver, almost like heat rising off a stone. I mean, think about a shifting coastline like this one. Places like this are so powerful because they totally resist our control. The world here just refuses to be a static, predictable stage for our little personal story. It's in constant motion, and it reminds you, hey, you are not the main character here. Or take a look at these wind-carved uplands. In a place like this, the whole thingness of the world just kind of dissolves. A rock isn't just a rock anymore. It's a living piece of evidence of wind and water and time. Everything is just a function of the environment, including, for a little while, you. Okay, so you've done the walk-in, you've shed the ego, you've found a thin place. Now what? We finally get to the practice itself. And it's a discipline that's defined not by what you do, but by this immense sense of restraint. This is just such a beautiful way to describe the kind of patience you need. You don't just show up and start snapping photos. No, you wait. You wait until your presence is no longer an intrusion. You wait until the birds go back to their business, and even the wind seems to have forgotten you're even there, accepting you as part of the landscape. And only then, only when you have finally thinned out enough, does the moment arrive. And pressing the shutter isn't some big act of creative will. It's described as a quiet duty. It's a single, humble acknowledgement of the balance you finally reached with the world. That is the sacrament of the single frame. So what do you actually bring back from a journey like this? It's not a trophy, it's not some award-winning shot. It's something way more subtle and way more profound. The photograph you end up with isn't the prize. It's just the residue. It's the modest, quiet proof that for one incredible, luminous moment, you vanished. You didn't take the picture. You just allowed the scene to register itself, while you were, thankfully, out of the way.
And this brings us to the ultimate lesson of silent photography. In a world that is obsessed with self-expression and making your mark, this practice teaches the exact opposite, that the ability to disappear is actually a far more valuable, a far higher skill.
The ultimate goal, then, isn't really a different kind of photograph. It's a different kind of awareness. It's the realization that the wall between yourself and the world, well, it was always just an illusion. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What would you truly see if you first learned how to disappear?